Everybody remembers heroes. We grew up with them. We wanted to be them. They inspired our every step. Okay, I'm joking. This is boring as fuck. You want to know what's not boring though? Villains. In this video, we're not just going to talk about any villains, but we'll dissect those who mattered. What are some qualities that make a villain iconic? Why a good villain can make or break a game.
You have had the honor of witnessing the slaughter of every gladiator sent in against me!
At the heart of some of the best stories ever told through video games is a simple and ancient literary trope, conflict. Conflict happens between two characters, the protagonist and the antagonist. The protagonist is the main character of the story, and the antagonist literally opposes the protagonist and represents the challenge they need to overcome. In video games, this usually means the final boss, or villain, because you play the good guy, the hero. Not all antagonists are villains, and not all protagonists are heroes, but all villains are antagonists, if that makes any sense. Many games are born from some sort of conflict between two forces, one preventing the other from achieving their goal. The why and the how of that conflict is the game's story, and if it's interesting and exciting enough, then that game has a lot more chances of being a great one. Villains play a huge role in the game's story, and often in the gameplay too. So here are some of the most iconic ones, and this is why you can't really forget them. Villains. Final Fantasy VII is considered one of the greatest video games ever made, with a story so compelling and remarkable that it spawned spin-off games, a movie, and even a remake 23 years after it was first released. Arguably one of the reasons for this success is its villain. Malevolent, ruthless, a terrifying presence, an inhuman force of nature that weighs down on the main characters and the narrative like a ton of bricks. What's interesting is that Sephiroth doesn't even appear until 4 or 5 hours into the original game. And even after meeting Sephiroth, Cloud and his party spent most of the game simply following him through the world, always a few steps behind, witnessing the destruction he causes in his wake. And when they finally encounter him again, well, he knows how to leave one hell of an impression on them. It's not just this unforgettable moment that makes him iconic though. He's more than just a Michael Myers style slasher baddie. Sephiroth has reasons for his inhumanely destructive agenda. And those motivations tie into Cloud's story in a way that's well crafted and well executed. In fact, he has a lot in common with one of the greatest villains in cinema history, Psycho's Norman Bates. The madness, the terror they inflict, and most of all, their particular relationship with their mother. When Resident Evil Village was announced, and trailers and information began to be released about the game, one element more than any other took the internet by storm: one of its villains. Lady Alcina Dimitrescu.
Let's see how special you are.
Why? Well, at that time, her actual motivations and powers as an antagonist were completely unknown. What was known, however, was enough. Tall, imposing, dangerous, dominant. Hers was a face that launched 1,000 fanfics and DeviantArt accounts, tapping into a market that not everybody acknowledged, but sure as hell existed. Yes, the Step on Me crowd. Lady Dimitrex was actually only one of the multiple villains standing in the way of the protagonist, Ethan Winters. In fact, she was arguably the lowest ranked as the first antagonist encountered and the first defeated. She's killed off in the first few hours of the game, and most of Village's runtime is actually focused on other villains. You would think that a quick exit would deflate Lady Dimitrex's reputation, but it didn't. The impression she left on video game culture can still be felt today. She's the prime example of a villain being memorable based purely on design.
Oh, careful what you wish for, Ethan Winters.
Portal was a short game, but that doesn't mean it wasn't memorable or iconic, or forever influential. A puzzle game originally bundled in the orange box version of Half-Life 2, Portal was revolutionary not only for its gameplay and puzzle design, but for its dark humor and atmosphere.
The only thing you've managed to break so far is my heart.
There were only two characters, Chell, the protagonist, and Glados, a passive-aggressive, overbearing artificial intelligence in charge of a testing facility, and its guinea pig, you. But every line of dialogue she speaks is full of condescension and malice as she forces Chell to do her bidding and complete her tests.
You did it. The weighted companion cube certainly brought you good luck.
Then, she tries to kill you. Classic villain behavior. The concept of a rogue AI serving as a villain has been done before, most notably in System Shock. But where Shodan was a completely malevolent presence, GLaDOS is quirky and comedic.
God, you're all right.
Her deadpan wit and quips turn what would be a simple set of puzzle rooms into an unforgettable adventure. It's her characterization and writing that make her memorable. And that's why GLaDOS still holds up today as a great example of video game villainy.
The best solution to a problem is usually the easiest one. And I'll be honest, killing you is hard.
Bioshock, the spiritual sequel to System Shock, also had quite a remarkable villain, Andrew Ryan, the master of Rapture, a city of endless possibilities and free market capitalism. As our voiceless protagonist fights his way through a submerged hellscape full of insane addicts, Andrew Ryan talks about the Great Chain, an idea based on the writings of Ayn Rand.
A great chain of industry that unites us.
Why should brilliant people be forced to pay taxes or adhere to some sort of religious or secular concept of ethics? He built an entire city under the sea to get away from the governments and restrictions of the surface world, in order to make sure his libertarian ideals could flourish unopposed. Unfortunately for him, some of the people he invited to his new society had other ideas, and in order to counter them, he had to become what he hated, a dictator, censoring and taking over companies that were a threat. Andrew Ryan is a great example of a villain who is consumed by ideology, who is convinced of the righteousness of his cause so much that it blinds him to his own hypocrisy. Well, it certainly helps that he's voiced by Armin Shimmerman, who has the ability to articulate and ooze menace through a microphone like nobody else.
Sit, would you kindly? Stand, would you kindly?
Last but not least, Arthas Menethil, the Lich King. He follows a path that will lead him to becoming arguably the signature villain of the Warcraft franchise. He's initially a chivalrous, noble paladin and the son of the king of Lordaeron. As a plague of undeath spreads through his homeland, Arthas begins taking more and more desperate and ethically questionable measures to fight them. The pivotal moment in his downfall is when he decides to purge the city of Stratholme, dooming thousands of uninfected civilians to die, just to be rid of the infected. He then spirals into darker and darker deeds like the murder of his own father. The concept of a hero corrupted by hubris, or tempted by evil and falling from grace, is an ancient one. Watching a good guy fall prey to his worst instincts and lose it all is compelling. After all, it's one of the fundamental human fears, that we would one day become what we hate. One-dimensional manifestations of evil, who are just evil for evil's sake, don't make memorable villains. What tends to stick in the mind are antagonists with layered personalities. Sephiroth was an inhumane terror, but he was made that way by a horrifying realization about his origins. The Lich King was once Arthas, a virtuous prince who took vengeance too far and fell the furthest a paladin possibly could. Andrew Ryan was a despot who doomed the city he built because he refused to recognize his ideology's weaknesses and his own hypocrisy. A lot of thought was put into the design of GLaDOS. Her curved robotic chassis was modeled after Botticelli's Birth of Venus, just upside down. The casting of Ellen McLean and those robotic, barely human tones help make her excellent writing stand out even more. Solid stories, interesting choices, devastating consequences. This is what makes video game villains memorable and iconic. But like with most things, sometimes it's all about the looks.
Villain.